There's this moment in You're Getting Old, Season 15, Episode 7, aired June 8th, 2011, where Stan Marsh turns 10 years old, and suddenly, everything he used to love looks like shit to him. I mean that literally. The music, the movies, his friends, his food, it all physically transforms into feces on screen. And at the end of the episode, as his parents separate and his friendship with Kyle crumbles, and he's lying alone on a bed in a new apartment, Fleetwood Mac's Landslide starts playing. No dialogue, no jokes, just this devastatingly quiet montage of a kid who can't enjoy anything anymore. And here's the thing, when that episode aired, a lot of people thought that was it. They thought Trey Parker and Matt Stone were saying goodbye. That after 15 seasons of the most consistently fearless show in television history, the guys who created South Park had finally gotten too old, too tired, too cynical to keep going. The credits rolled in silence. No bumper music. Nothing. Just quiet. And the internet lost its mind. They didn't quit, obviously. South Park is still going strong as I'm recording this, closing in on 30 seasons and counting. But that episode, that moment, it captures something that every longtime South Park fan has wrestled with at some point. The question I keep coming back to. The question that brought you here tonight. When did South Park's golden age actually end? Did it end? Is it still happening? Or are we all just Stan Marsh, turning 10, unable to see the thing we loved for what it still is? Tonight, we're going through all of it. Every era, every turning point, the shock value beginnings, the satirical peak years, the movie that got an Oscar nomination, the episodes that changed television, the serialization experiments, the Tegrity Farms era, and the massive deal that keeps the show alive through 2030. I'm going to break down exactly when South Park was at its absolute best, when it started to change, and whether that change was a decline or just an evolution, because those aren't the same thing. And the answer is a lot more complicated than most people want it to be. So if you're watching this late at night, get comfortable, grab a blanket, maybe a snack. We're going to be here for a while, and I'm going to need you to stick with me through some deep cuts. And if you haven't subscribed to Paper Town yet, this would be an amazing time to do that. It genuinely helps us keep making these long-form videos for you. And if you're the kind of person who clicks on a video about the golden age of South Park, you're exactly who we're making these for. All right, let's start at the very beginning. And I mean the very beginning, before the show even existed. In 1992, two film students at the University of Colorado named Trey Parker and Matt Stone made a short animated film using construction paper cutouts. It was called The Spirit of Christmas, also known as Jesus vs. Frosty. And it featured crude little prototypes of the characters we'd eventually know as Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny. The animation was, and I'm being generous here, terrible. Deliberately terrible. Stop motion paper cutouts with visible fingerprints on them. But there was something about it, some kind of energy, a willingness to be absurdly offensive while also being weirdly smart about it. A few years later, in 1995, a Fox executive named Brian Graydon sent Parker and Stone $1,200. $1,200, that's it, to make a second short as a video Christmas card. The result was another Spirit of Christmas, usually called Jesus vs. Santa, and this one looked a lot closer to what South Park would become. Graydon sent the tape to friends, who copied it and sent it to their friends, and within weeks, it became one of the first genuine viral videos. This was 1995. Remember, people were physically passing VHS copies and floppy disks around offices. The internet was barely a thing for most people, and yet this crude little cartoon about Jesus and Santa Claus fighting in a parking lot was everywhere. Fox considered picking up a series, but ultimately passed, and honestly, thank God they did, because what happened next changed cable television permanently. Comedy Central, which at the time was a relatively minor cable network with about 9 million subscribers, signed on to produce a full series. South Park debuted on August 13, 1997, with its very first episode, and if you know the show, you know the one I'm talking about. The pilot where Cartman has a close encounter with some very invasive extraterrestrials. And I need you to appreciate the cultural moment here. The late 90s were peak culture war era. The Parents Television Council was at the height of its power. Parental advisories were on everything. And here comes this crude, deliberately ugly little cartoon about kids in a Colorado town dealing with aliens, an absurdity so extreme it made network executives physically uncomfortable, airing on a cable network most people's packages didn't even carry. The first episode pulled a Nielsen rating of 1.3, about 980,000 viewers. Not bad for a cable show nobody had heard of. But by the time Damien aired as the 10th episode, the ratings had exploded to a 6.4. That kind of growth was insane. Comedy Central's subscriber base went from 9.1 million households in 1997 to 50 million by June of 1998. The price for a 30-second commercial during South Park went from $7,500 to as high as $80,000. In less than a year, this show built by two guys in their 20s from Colorado had essentially put Comedy Central on the map. And look, I've gone back and rewatched those early episodes recently, and I have complicated feelings about them. Because here's what Trey Parker himself has said about seasons 1 through 3 in an interview with The Hollywood Reporter in 2011. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here because I want to get the spirit right, that if he could permanently erase anything from the South Park library, it would be basically anything before season 4. He called it embarrassing to watch. He said he and Matt were 26, 27 at the time, and they just look at it now and think, really? We thought that was funny? We thought that was well written? And you know what? I get it. I totally get where he's coming from. But I also think he's wrong. Or at least, he's only telling part of the story. Because those first 3 seasons, messy and crude as they are, they're the foundation everything else was built on. Without Cartman saying, "Screw you guys, I'm going home" 17 times in season 1, you don't get the Cartman who feeds a kid his own parents in season 5. Without Mr. Garrison's absurd inappropriateness in the classroom, you don't get the Mr. Garrison who becomes a Trump surrogate 18 seasons later. Without Chef singing hilariously inappropriate love songs to the boys, you don't get the heartbreaking meta commentary of The Return of Chef in season 10. The early episodes are rough, I won't argue that. Jacovosaurs, season 3, episode 4, is pretty widely regarded as one of the worst episodes in the show's history, and I'm not going to fight anyone on that. A lot of the humor in those first seasons is shock value for its own sake. Fart jokes, gross out gags, Kenny dying in increasingly elaborate ways. And the storytelling structure is loose. Most episodes had 2 or 3 loosely related plot lines that would awkwardly converge in the final act, which sometimes worked and sometimes felt like they just ran out of time. But there are moments in those early seasons that are genuinely brilliant. Big Gay Al's Big Gay Boat Ride, season 1, episode 4, aired September 3rd, 1997, was one of the first mainstream animated shows to present a positive portrayal of homosexuality. It earned a Gilad nomination in 1997 from a show people were calling the worst thing to happen to television. Starvin' Marvin had something genuinely sharp to say about celebrity charity culture, and Chinpokomon in season 3 was a devastatingly precise parody of Pokemon Mania that still holds up today. But here's what's really important about those first 3 seasons, and this is something even Trey Parker might not fully appreciate. They established the tone. They established that this show exists in a world where anything can happen, where the rules of decency don't apply, where 4 little kids in a small Colorado mountain town can face literally any scenario the writers can imagine. That anarchic, anything goes energy is what made everything that came later possible. You can't have the brilliance of season 5 without the chaos of season 1. The foundation had to be poured before the cathedral could be built. And then there's the movie. Oh God, the movie. South Park, bigger, longer, and uncut, was released on June 30th, 1999, right between seasons 2 and 3, and I genuinely believe this is one of the most underappreciated pieces of American filmmaking from the 90s. I know that sounds insane. It's a movie where Satan has a sexual relationship with Saddam Hussein, but stay with me here. The film was produced on a $21 million budget and grossed $83 million worldwide, making it the highest grossing R-rated animated film at the time, a record it held until Sausage Party in 2016. But more importantly, it was a full-blown musical, not just a comedy with some songs. A real, structured, Broadway-quality musical with reprises and counterpoint and everything. Trey Parker, who had studied at the Berklee College of Music before transferring to the University of Colorado, composed the entire score with composer Mark Shaman, and the song Blame Canada was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Original Song at the 72nd Academy Awards. Think about that for a second. A song from a movie where Cartman has a V-chip implanted in his brain that shocks him every time he swears was nominated for the same award that had gone to people like Elton John and Alan Menken. Time magazine later called the soundtrack the finest, sassiest full movie musical score since the disbanding of the Freed unit at MGM. That's not a joke review. That's a genuine critical assessment. And the movie itself, it's a perfect piece of satire about censorship and moral panic, using the structure of a Disney Renaissance musical to tell a story about how clutching your pearls over bad words in entertainment can literally lead to war. It was Parker and Stone fighting the MPAA in real life. The film was initially rated NC-17, and they had to submit it multiple times to get it down to an R, while simultaneously making a movie about the absurdity of those very ratings. The meta layers are insane. I bring up the movie because I think it represents a crucial turning point. It's where Parker and Stone proved they could do more than just shock people. They could write, they could compose, they could construct a narrative. And when they came back from making that film, they were different writers, more ambitious, more confident, more interested in saying something real beneath the toilet humor. And that brings us to season 4, which, depending on who you ask, is where the golden age actually begins. Season 4 premiered on April 5th, 2000, and you can feel the shift immediately. The humor is still crude. This is South Park. It's always going to be crude, but there's a purpose behind it now. The Tooth Fairy Tiff explores existentialism through a kid's black market for baby teeth. Cartman joins NAMBLA is simultaneously one of the most offensive and one of the most structurally tight episodes the show had done to that point. Cherokee hair tampons has a genuinely effective emotional arc about Kyle's illness, and the town is growing. That's something people don't talk about enough. In the first 3 seasons, South Park the town was basically a backdrop. The school, the bus stop, a few houses, and whatever location the plot required. Starting in season 4, the town itself starts to feel like a real place. New characters get introduced and stick around. Timmy Birch shows up in Timmy 2000, season 4, episode 3, and immediately becomes a recurring character who opens up whole new avenues for storytelling. The range of what the show can do expands significantly, and the satire gets sharper, so much sharper. Where the early seasons were mostly doing shock humor and the occasional pop culture parody, season 4 starts going after real institutions and real ideas. Probably season 4, episode 10, aired July 26th, 2000, takes on organized religion in a way the show hadn't attempted before, with Cartman accidentally becoming a televangelist. It's not just religion is funny, it's a specific critique of how charismatic manipulation works in faith-based communities. That's a level of sophistication the show simply wasn't operating at in season 1. But I want to be clear about something. When I say season 4 is where things start to change, I don't think it's where the golden age begins. I think the golden age of South Park is a moving target, and it depends entirely on what you value about the show. If you love the anarchic, anything goes energy and the pure comedy of the early years, then the golden age starts in 1997. If you love the satirical precision and the character depth, then yeah, it starts around season 4 or 5. If you love the cultural impact and the willingness to go after sacred cows, you might put it as late as season 9 or 10. And here's where I need to lay my cards on the table, because the prompt says the narrator has opinions, and I do. I think the golden age of South Park is seasons 5 through 13, and I think the single moment where it crystallizes, the exact episode where South Park transforms from a very good show into an all-time great, is Scott Tenerman Must Die, season 5, episode 4, aired July 11th. 2001. And I've rewatched this episode probably 8 or 9 times in the last month putting this video together, and it still gets me every single time. Not because it's surprising anymore, everyone knows what happens in this episode. It's one of the most famous twists in television history, but because the craftsmanship of it is so precise, so ruthless, so perfectly constructed, that knowing what's coming almost makes it better. Here's the setup. Cartman gets scammed by an older kid named Scott Tenerman. He pays $10 for something he thinks will make him mature, only to find out he's been completely played. Stan and Kyle tell him he's an idiot. Cartman realizes he's been conned and tries to get his money back, but Scott keeps outsmarting him. Every scheme Cartman comes up with, Scott turns it around. He takes more money. He publicly humiliates Cartman. He burns Cartman's money right in front of him. And this is where the episode does something that changed the show permanently. Up until this point, Cartman was annoying. He was selfish. He was a little racist. But he was fundamentally a kid. A bratty, entitled, occasionally cruel kid, but still recognizably a kid. And then, and this is the moment, this is the one, Cartman snaps. Something inside him breaks, or maybe something that was always there finally wakes up. And he hatches a plan so elaborate, so patient, so unthinkably evil that even his best friends don't see it coming. I don't even want to spell out the full details of the plan, because even now, in a video that assumes you've seen the episode, describing it feels transgressive. But if you know, you know. Cartman orchestrates a revenge so elaborate, so patient, so darkly creative that it involves Scott's own family, a chili cook-off, and the members of Radiohead, Scott's favorite band, all converging in a moment so devastating that it retroactively changes what you thought this show was capable of. And Cartman licks the tears off Scott's face and says they're delicious. I need you to think about what just happened in that episode. An 8-year-old orchestrated something so twisted, so far beyond anything the show had done before, over $16.12. And the episode plays it not as horror, though it is horrifying, but as the moment where we finally understand who Eric Cartman really is. As Trey Parker himself said in an interview, this episode was made specifically to show how evil Cartman could be. It took him from being a little jerk to being, as TV Tropes puts it, probably the most evil kid in the world. And here's what I love most about it. The episode is structured so that for the first 20 minutes, you're kind of rooting for Cartman. You want him to get his money back. Scott Tenerman is a bully. He's mean. He deserves some comeuppance. And then the reveal happens and you realize, oh no. The person I was rooting for isn't the underdog. He's a monster. And I was laughing along the whole time. That right there is what South Park does better than any other show on television. It makes you complicit. It makes you realize that your own sense of justice, your own desire to see the bad guy get what's coming to him, can lead you somewhere genuinely terrible. That's not a fart joke. That's not shock value. That's moral philosophy dressed up in construction paper. Parker and Stone have both pointed to this episode as a milestone in the series. It also changed their writing process. They've said it prompted them to focus on single plot episodes rather than the multi-plot structure of earlier seasons. And that structural shift is huge because it meant every episode from this point forward could go deeper on a single idea, could really commit to exploring one concept thoroughly, rather than bouncing between 3 loosely connected threads. Season 5 as a whole is just absurdly good. I mean, look at the lineup. It Hits the Fan, the season premiere, aired June 20th, 2001, used the word shit uncensored 162 times to satirize the absurdity of broadcast standards. Cripple Fight tackled discrimination in youth organizations, with Timmy and the newly introduced Jimmy Valmer getting into a full-on recreated fight from the movie They Live. Super Best Friends brought together religious leaders as a superhero team and included an uncensored depiction of the Prophet Muhammad, something that would become hugely controversial years later, but went completely unremarked upon in 2001. Cartman Land explored the problem of evil through the lens of Kyle's faith, while Cartman inherits $1 million and buys an amusement park just so no one else can use it. And then there's Kenny Dies, Season 5, Episode 13, aired December 5th, 2001. Kenny had been dying as a running gag since the very first episode. Oh my god, they killed Kenny! You bastard! Every single time. But in Kenny Dies, they played it straight. Kenny gets a terminal illness. He actually genuinely dies. Not in a quick sight gag, slowly, painfully, while his friends watch. While Cartman manipulates the situation for his own benefit, of course. But the emotional core of the episode is real. Stan can't even bring himself to visit Kenny in the hospital because he can't face it. That's not a joke. That's a genuine exploration of how children process death. And the episode that followed, the season finale, Butters' very own episode, gave a full spotlight to Leopold Butters Stotch, who had been a background character since the first episode, but was now stepping into the void left by Kenny's permanent death. I say permanent in quotes because Kenny came back in the season 6 finale, but for an entire season, he was gone. And Butters became one of the most important characters in the show's history. I've rewatched Butters' very own episode, season 5, episode 14, aired December 12th, 2001, 3 times while working on this video. And it's the one that hits me hardest because it takes this impossibly innocent, pathetically sweet kid and puts him through absolute hell. His dad has a secret double life. His mom, upon learning the truth, has a complete breakdown and tries to get rid of Butters by driving their car into a river. Butters survives, wanders through the wilderness, and eventually makes it home, only for his parents to claim he was kidnapped by some Puerto Rican guy. The entire family dynamic between Butters and his parents is simultaneously hilarious and deeply, deeply sad. It's the kind of episode that makes you laugh until it makes you hurt. And this is what I mean when I talk about the golden age. It's not just about the jokes being funnier, although they are. The hit rate in seasons 5 through 8 is insane. It's about the show developing the ability to make you feel things, real things, sadness, anger, disgust, empathy. And then, just when you're getting comfortable with the emotional depth, Cartman does something so unforgivably horrible that you remember, oh right, this is still South Park. The tonal control is masterful. Season 6, which premiered on March 6, 2002, is the season without Kenny. And it's the first season where you can really feel the show stretching its muscles as a storytelling medium. Without Kenny around to kill every episode, the writers had to find new sources of comedy and tension. Butters tried to fill Kenny's role in the friend group and immediately proved too innocent for the position. The boys replaced him with Tweak Tweak, the anxious, coffee-addicted kid who also didn't last. Eventually, Butters settled into his own thing, not a replacement for Kenny, but his own unique presence in the show. The episodes in this season are all over the place in the best way. Aspen, season 6, 6, Episode 2, is a pitch-perfect parody of 80s ski movies that nails every single cliché while the parents are trapped in a timeshare presentation. The Return of the Fellowship of the Ring to the Two Towers imagines the boys on a Lord of the Rings quest, except The Ring is an adult film that needs to be returned to the video store. Free Hat has the boys accidentally starting a movement to free a convicted baby killer because they couldn't get anyone to come to their film preservation meeting. But the episode from season 6 that I keep coming back to, the one I think about at 2 in the morning sometimes, which is probably not great for my mental health, is My Future Self and Me. Season 6, episode 16, aired December 4th, 2002. In this one, Stan meets a man claiming to be his future self, sent back in time as a warning about what happens if you do drugs. Except it's a lie. The parents are hiring actors to scare their kids straight. And when Stan discovers the truth, he calls a service that punishes lying parents by having someone show up at your house and smear feces on the walls. On paper, that sounds completely insane, and it is. But underneath the absurdity is a really sharp observation about how parents communicate with their children about drugs. The episode's argument, which Stan articulates clearly at the end, is that lying to your kids about the dangers of drugs is actually worse than telling them the truth, because when they inevitably discover the lie, they'll distrust everything you've ever told them. That's a nuanced, sophisticated argument about parenting and drug education, delivered through a story about a fake time traveler and a wall-smearing service. Only South Park. And that's what the Golden Age feels like. It feels like the show discovered it could be about anything. It could be about Mormonism. It could be about metrosexuality. It could be about the Iraq War. It could be about stem cell research. It could be about Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ. And every single time, it would find the absurd angle, the one nobody else was talking about, and mine it for comedy and insight simultaneously. Season 7, which premiered on March 19th, 2003, is where I think the show fully locks in. This is the 100th episode season. Kenny comes back in the finale, and in between, you get some of the most iconic episodes in the show's entire run. Casa Bonita, Season 7, Episode 11, is Cartman at his most deranged, and his most weirdly sympathetic. All he wants is to go to his favorite restaurant for Kyle's birthday party. That's it. That's his entire motivation. And he locks Butters in a bomb shelter and tells him the apocalypse has happened, just so he can take Butters' spot at the party. It's so incredibly fucked up and so incredibly funny because you can see the logic in Cartman's broken little brain. He doesn't think he's doing anything wrong. He just really wants to see the cliff divers at Casa Bonita. Trey Parker and Matt Stone loved Casa Bonita so much, the actual restaurant in Lakewood, Colorado, that they eventually purchased and renovated it in real life. That's how deep the connection between the show and its Colorado roots run. Christian Rock Hard, Season 7, Episode 9, takes on both the Christian music industry and the Napster file sharing controversy in a single episode. Cartman forms a Christian rock band by taking love songs and replacing Baby with Jesus, and it works so well that the band goes platinum. Meanwhile, Stan and Kyle join a musicians' protest against file sharing, only to realize that the super rich rock stars they're protesting alongside don't exactly need the money. The episode's genius is in playing both sides. The Christian music industry is hilariously hollow, but the anti-piracy movement is hilariously out of touch. Nobody gets off easy. All About Mormons, Season 7, Episode 12, does something the show would later expand into a full Broadway musical. It presents the actual story of Joseph Smith finding the golden plates, with a narrator singing "Dum Dum 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 Dum" after every implausible detail, while simultaneously showing a Mormon family being so genuinely kind and well-adjusted that Stan can't bring himself to mock them. The ending, where the new Mormon kid stands up and basically says, "Yeah, my religion sounds dumb, but it makes me happy, and my family is great, so what's your problem?" is one of the most unexpectedly moving moments in the show's history. It's the same energy that would eventually fuel The Book of Mormon on Broadway, and you can see the seeds of that musical right here. And here's the thing, I keep listing episodes, and I know I'm going to list a lot more before this video is over, because part of what defines a golden age is density. When every season has 10 or 15 episodes, and 8 or 9 of them are legitimately great, that's a golden age. When you can't even remember the mediocre episodes because they're surrounded by classics, that's a golden age. And for South Park, that density runs from roughly season 5 all the way through at least season 10, maybe 12 or 13. depending on your tolerance. Which brings me to something I want to sit with for a minute, because it's important to understanding how South Park works. And it's this: the show's production process is unlike anything else on television. Most animated shows take months to produce a single episode. The Simpsons famously takes 6 to 8 months per episode. Family Guy, 4 to 9 months. South Park makes an episode in 6 days. Sometimes less. Sometimes much less. This was documented beautifully in the 2011 documentary 6 Days to Air, which followed the production of the season 15 premiere, Human Centipede. The documentary, directed by Arthur Bradford, shows Trey Parker arriving at the studio on a Thursday with literally no idea what the episode will be about. By Wednesday night, 6 days later, a finished episode has been written, voice acted, animated, and delivered to Comedy Central, often just hours before airtime. And Trey Parker, every single week, goes through a crisis of confidence. He's been quoted saying something to the effect of, every show, he's always saying, "Oh God, can we call the studio? Can we call Comedy Central and tell them there's no show this week?" And Matt Stone has to talk him down every time. This has been happening for almost 30 years. The night before Make Love Not Warcraft aired, one of the most beloved episodes in the entire series, Parker told the producers he'd lost it, that he didn't know how to make the show anymore, that this episode was going to ruin South Park's legacy because it was so bad. He literally begged executive producer Ann Garofino to call Comedy Central and cancel the broadcast. That episode won the Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program. I bring this up because the 6-day production cycle is absolutely fundamental to what makes South Park's golden age golden. It's what allows the show to be timely in a way no other animated show can match. When something happens in the news on Monday, South Park can have an episode about it airing on Wednesday. The Iraq War, Hurricane Katrina, the Terry Schiavo case, the death of Steve Irwin. Whatever is dominating the cultural conversation right now, South Park can address it while it's still relevant. And that speed is a double-edged sword. Sometimes it produces episodes that feel rushed, that don't quite land, that have a great concept, but fumble the execution. But when it works, when Trey Parker is locked in, and the writing room is firing on all cylinders, and the animation team is pulling 20-hour shifts, it produces television that feels electric, that feels alive in a way that a show with a 9-month lead time simply cannot. This is especially true for seasons 8 through 10, which I consider the absolute peak of the peak, the dead center of the golden age. And I know some people will argue with me on the exact boundaries. Some fans think the peak is seasons 5 through 9, others say 4 through 8, but for my money, these 3 seasons represent the show at its most confident, most ambitious, and most consistently brilliant. Season 8 premiered on March 17, 2004. Happy anniversary, by the way, if you're watching this on the right date, with 14 episodes, and I genuinely don't think there's a bad one in the bunch. Good Times with Weapons, the premiere, does the anime parody thing, switching art styles when the boys imagine themselves as Japanese warriors. And it's not just funny, it's visually inventive in a way the show rarely attempted before. Osimo puts Cartman in a robot costume to spy on Butters and ends up being both hilarious and oddly touching. The Passion of the Jew takes on Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ by having Kyle, guilt-ridden after seeing the film, lead an apology movement while Cartman uses the film to fuel his anti-Semitism, and Gibson himself shows up as a masochistic lunatic. Goobax, which drew 30 million viewers, the highest single episode viewership in South Park history, tackled immigration through time travelers from the future who come to the present to take people's jobs. The famous solution? Everyone back to the pile. But the episode from season 8 that I want to talk about in depth is Woodland Critter Christmas. The season finale aired December 15, 2004, because I think this episode is a perfect encapsulation of everything that makes Golden Age South Park what it is. It starts as a parody of Rankin/base Christmas specials. Cute woodland creatures, a bear named Barry, a rabbit named Rabbity, a squirrel named Squirrely, ask Stan to help them protect a star that will help the chosen one be born on Christmas. The narration is in rhyming couplets. The animation is deliberately cute. It feels like a wholesome Christmas special for the first act. And then the woodland critters turn out to be Satanists. They need the Antichrist to be born. They perform horrifying rituals in the forest. They take out a mountain lion to prevent her cubs from stopping the birth of the Antichrist. And the narrator, the rhyming, gentle, Christmas special narrator, has to describe all of this in the same sweet tone. The twist at the very end is that the entire story is being told by Cartman as a Christmas story to the class. It's fiction within fiction. Kyle is furious because Cartman made him the villain of the story, and Cartman's response is basically, "What? It's a Christmas story. Why are you making it weird?" That episode aired during the same holiday season that Mel Gibson's Passion controversy was still raging, that the FCC was cracking down on broadcast indecency after the Janet Jackson Super Bowl incident, and that culture war anxiety over what was and wasn't appropriate for American media was at a fever pitch. And South Park's response was to make the most inappropriately sacrilegious Christmas special imaginable and wrap it in the most innocent packaging possible. That's not just comedy, that's a statement. Season 9, which premiered on March 9th, 2005, keeps the momentum going. Best Friends Forever, the second episode, won the Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program, beating out Family Guy, The Simpsons, and others. It aired on March 30th, 2005, the same day Terry Schiavo died, and used Kenny's death as a parallel to the Schiavo right to die controversy. The fact that they could produce an episode that was topically relevant to a news story unfolding in real time and have it be funny and thoughtful and emotionally resonant is the 6-day production cycle at its absolute best. Trapped in the Closet, Season 9, Episode 12, aired November 16th, 2005, went after Scientology harder than any mainstream show had dared before. It presented the actual beliefs of Scientology on screen with the caption, "This is what Scientologists actually believe," running underneath. Tom Cruise locks himself in Stan's closet and refuses to come out. R. Kelly shows up and also refuses to come out of a closet. The episode is densely layered with jokes, but the real impact was cultural. Isaac Hayes, who played Chef and was himself a Scientologist, left the show over it, which led to one of the most painful episodes in the series. The Return of Chef, Season 10, Episode 1, aired March 22nd, 2006, dealt with Hayes' departure by having Chef be brainwashed by a super adventure club, with Chef's dialogue cobbled together from old recordings of Hayes' previous performances on the show. It was simultaneously a tribute to Chef, a satire of Scientology's alleged control over its members, and a genuinely sad goodbye to a character who had been part of the show since the very first episode. The way they killed Chef off, graphically, brutally, after having him be exploited by a predatory organization, was their way of saying, "We love Isaac Hayes, but we're angry at what we believe Scientology did to him." It's one of the most emotionally complex episodes in the show's history, and it aired in what I consider the last great season of the show's unambiguous peak. Because here's where it gets complicated. Season 10 also gave us Make Love, Not Warcraft, Episode 8, aired October 4th, 2006, which is arguably the single most popular episode in South Park history. Fans voted it into first place in a major 2011 iTunes poll called Year of the Fan. It won the Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program. It was produced in collaboration with Blizzard Entertainment, who provided their own character models and computers, and let the South Park team film on their alpha servers for World of Warcraft, The Burning Crusade. The episode drew 3.4 million viewers, making it Comedy Central's highest-rated mid-season premiere since 2000. And what makes Make Love, Not Warcraft so perfect is that you don't need to know anything about World of Warcraft to enjoy it. The core joke that these kids are so obsessed with a video game that they become obese, acne-covered shut-ins who communicate entirely through headsets is universal. Every generation has had its version of this experience. The specifics are World of Warcraft, but the truth is about obsession and escapism, and the way we lose ourselves in virtual worlds at the expense of the real one. The machinima sequences, the in-game footage, were filmed over 5 shooting days, with up to 20 people controlling characters on screen, and Trey Parker essentially directing them like a live-action shoot. And here's a production detail that I love. During the filming on Blizzard's servers, an unauthorized player somehow hacked in and started disrupting their session. They were being griefed while making an episode about being griefed. You can't write that kind of irony. So by the end of Season 10, South Park has won multiple Emmys, won a Peabody Award in 2005. Their acceptance speech, for which Parker and Stone used to talk about how great Battlestar Galactica was, which is the most Trey and Matt thing imaginable, has a movie with an Oscar-nominated song, has tackled Scientology, the war on terror, immigration, religion, file sharing, World of Warcraft, the Terry Schiavo case, Hurricane Katrina, and dozens of other topics, and has consistently maintained a level of quality that other shows can only dream of in their best individual seasons. If you asked me to pinpoint the single greatest stretch of South Park episodes, gun to my head, pick one run, I'd say it starts with Scott Tenerman Must Die in Season 5 and ends somewhere around Imagination Land at the end of Season 11. That's roughly 7 seasons seasons and over 90 episodes of almost unbroken excellence. There are duds in there, sure. Every show has its off episodes, but the batting average across that stretch is extraordinary. Imagination Land, the 3-part epic from season 11, episodes 10 through 12, aired October through December 2007, is its own kind of achievement. It's a 3-episode story where terrorists attack the realm of human imagination, forcing good imaginary characters like Aslan, Luke Skywalker, and Popeye to fight against evil ones like Freddy Krueger, Jason, and the woodland critters from that season 8 Christmas episode. Meanwhile, in the real world, Cartman is desperately trying to force Kyle to honor a bet. It's epic in scope, hilarious in execution, and thematically, it's about the value of imagination itself. What we create in our minds matters, even if it isn't real. The Imagination Land trilogy aired the same year as The Simpsons movie, and I actually think the comparison is illuminating. The Simpsons needed a 100-minute movie to tell a single big story. South Park told an equally ambitious story in 3 regular episodes, produced within their normal 6-day cycle. That's the difference in agility between these shows. And it's one of the reasons South Park's golden age feels so much more alive than the corresponding periods of other long-running animated shows. And this brings me to the question I've been circling around since the beginning of this video. The question in the title. When did the golden age actually end? The honest answer? It depends. If you define the golden age purely by episode quality, the density of classics, the ratio of great episodes to mediocre ones, then I think you have to say it starts to taper somewhere around season 12 or 13. Not because those seasons are bad, they're not, they're both very good, but because the absolute peak intensity of seasons 5 through 11 is impossible to maintain. Season 12, which aired in 2008, has some great episodes, Super Fun Time, Major Boobage, and The Ungroundable, but it also has some episodes that feel like they're going through the motions a bit. Season 13 has The Coon and Margaritaville and Fish Sticks, which are all fantastic, but it also marks the transition to HD production, with the show moving from standard definition 4:3 to widescreen 16:9, starting with the 13th season in 2009. Everything was re-rendered. The look of the show changed. But if you define the golden age by cultural impact, by the show's ability to shape the national conversation, to be the thing everyone's talking about on Thursday morning, then you might argue it extends further. Season 14's 200 and 201 in 2010, which brought back every celebrity South Park had ever parodied and became a massive news story when Comedy Central censored the depiction of Muhammad after death threats from a radical Islamist group, was arguably one of the biggest moments in the show's entire history. It proved South Park still had the power to genuinely shock and provoke, even after 13 years on the air. And if you define the golden age by emotional ambition, by the show's willingness to make you feel something beyond laughter, then you might say the golden age peaks with You're Getting Old in season 15, because that episode, the one I opened this video with, is the most vulnerable South Park has ever been. It's Trey Parker and Matt Stone at 40 years old, looking at the show they created when they were 27 and asking, is this still good? Does this still matter? Are we just going through the motions? When Parker was asked about the episode later, he said something along the lines of, how long can you keep doing this? And that's not just a creative question, it's a deeply personal one. By 2011, he and Stone were no longer the wild 20-somethings who crashed the Oscars on LSD while wearing dresses in 2000. Parker had a family. Stone was married. They had created the Book of Mormon on Broadway. Their lives had changed enormously since 1997, and the show reflected that. Randy Marsh, who started as a blank slate background dad, had gradually become one of the most prominent characters because Parker and Stone no longer related to the kids. They related to the adults, to the dads having midlife crises, to the parents who couldn't understand what their children were into. That evolution is beautiful in a way, but it's also what some fans point to when they say the golden age ended. Because there's a version of South Park that's about 4 kids in a small town having insane adventures. And there's a different version of South Park that's about Randy Marsh making wine at Tegrity Farms while the kids are sidelined. Both versions can be good. Both have produced great episodes, but they're different shows in a real sense. Okay, I know I've been going for a while, and if you've stuck with me this far, first of all, thank you, genuinely. And second, we're not close to done, because we need to talk about the serialization era, the Trump problem, Tegrity Farms, the Paramount deal, and the question of whether South Park in the 2020s is in a second golden age or something entirely different. Let me talk about seasons 14 through 17 for a minute, because these are the the overlooked middle years. They're not the classic golden age. They're not the divisive serialization era. They're in between, and I think they're underrated. Season 14, 2010, opens with Sexual Healing, which parodies the Tiger Woods sex scandal. It's funny, it's timely, it's well structured. It's a solid South Park episode. Crippled Summer, episode 7, gives us a full Looney Tunes parody with the handicapped kids at summer camp. And it's one of those episodes that pushes taste so far that you're laughing and cringing simultaneously. It's a Jersey thing, brings Snooki from Jersey Shore into South Park as a literal monster, which in 2010 felt incredibly relevant, even if it's aged into pure nostalgia. But the big episodes from season 14 are 200 and 201. Episodes 5 and 6 aired April 14th and 21st, 2010. These were the show's landmark 200th and 201st episodes, and they brought back virtually every celebrity the show had ever mocked for a massive revenge plot against South Park. Tom Cruise organizes a class action lawsuit. Rob Reiner joins. Barbra Streisand returns as Mecha Streisand. The super best friends, including a depiction of Muhammad, are called in to help. And then the threats came. Revolution Muslim, a New York-based radical group, posted a warning on their website that Parker and Stone would likely end up like Theo Van Gogh, the Dutch filmmaker who was murdered for making a film critical of Islam, if South Park continued to depict Muhammad. Comedy Central responded by heavily censoring episode 201, bleeping out almost all references to Muhammad, and even censoring the speech at the end of the episode where Kyle delivers the moral. Parker and Stone were furious. The whole point of those episodes was about censorship and the ability to satirize everyone equally, and the network's response proved the episode's thesis. Here's what gets me about that whole situation. South Park had depicted Muhammad uncensored in Super Best Friends back in season 5, 2001. He was visible in the opening credits for years. Nobody cared. Nobody threatened anyone. But by 2010, the cultural landscape had shifted enough that the same depiction was now considered so dangerous that a major television network chose to censor its own show. That shift, that change in what was and wasn't permissible, is itself a huge part of the South Park Golden Age conversation. Because the Golden Age wasn't just about the show being great. It was about the show existing in a cultural moment where it could say anything. As that window narrowed, the show had to adapt. Season 15 is the You're Getting Old season, and I've already talked about that episode at length. But the rest of the season is worth discussing too. Human Centipede, the premiere, aired April 27, 2011, parodies a certain horror film by having Apple fuse Kyle into a bizarre human device because he didn't read the terms and conditions. It's gross and brilliant. TMI has Cartman causing havoc over body measurement comparisons, which is somehow used to comment on the Tea Party movement. Base to Mouth deals with online gossip and cyberbullying, and the second half of the season resolves the Stan cynicism arc from You're Getting Old with Asperger's, which finds that the only cure for Stan's cynicism is alcohol, which is played as a joke, but is also genuinely dark. Season 15 is also where you start to see the show experimenting with carrying elements across episodes. Not full serialization yet, that wouldn't come until season 18, but a looseness, a willingness to let consequences from one episode carry into the next. Stan's depression isn't resolved in a single episode. His parents' divorce isn't just reset the next week. These are small steps, but they point toward the bigger structural changes that would come later. Seasons 16 and 17, airing in 2012 and 2013 respectively, continue this pattern. Season 16 gives us Raising the Bar, which uses Honey Boo Boo as a metaphor for American culture literally hitting bottom, and Insecurity, which parodies home security system culture through a UPS delivery man sleeping with everyone's wife. These are good episodes. They're funny, they're sharp, but if I'm being honest, and I'm going to be honest with you because that's what this channel does, they don't quite hit the heights of the peak years. The comedic density isn't as tight. There are more episodes that feel competent rather than essential. And then season 17 hits, and something interesting happens. The first half of the season is pretty unremarkable. Some okay episodes, nothing spectacular. But the second half delivers the Black Friday trilogy, episodes 7, 8, and 9, which is a full-blown Game of Thrones parody, crossed with a commentary on consumer culture and the next-gen console wars between PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. It's 3 episodes of escalating absurdity, with the kids forming rival factions, Bill Hader guest starring as a narrator, and the whole thing building to an incredibly over-the-top conclusion. The Black Friday trilogy proved something important. South Park could do extended storytelling. It could sustain a narrative over multiple episodes in a way it hadn't really tried since Imagination Land. And this success, plus the evolving landscape of television, which was increasingly moving towards serialized storytelling, planted the seed for what would come next. Which brings us to the phase that divides the fanbase more than anything else: serialization. Season 18, which premiered on September 24, 2014, began experimenting with episode-to-episode continuity. Plot threads from one episode would carry into the next. Randy revealed himself as the Singer Lord. The gentrification of South Park became a running theme. It was still primarily episodic, but the connections between episodes were deliberate and visible. Season 19, premiering September 16, 2015, went all in. This was the first fully serialized season of South Park. Every episode was connected to an overarching narrative about political correctness, gentrification, and the culture wars. The central new character was PC Principal, a muscular, aggressive frat bro type who becomes principal of South Park Elementary and enforces progressive values through intimidation. Mr. Garrison, meanwhile, begins a transparently Trump-like presidential campaign. And look, season 19 is really good. I want to be clear about that. Stunning and Brave, the premiere, is a fantastic episode. The introduction of PC Principal is one of the best character additions the show has made in its later years. The gentrification subplot, with Sodo So PA and Whole Foods arriving in South Park, is sharply observed. The New York Times critic James Poniewozik called it a revitalizing season and praised its ambitious, serialized story. But here's the thing. Parker and Stone have admitted they didn't plan this. They told Vanity Fair that they didn't intend to make season 19 serialized. It just happened. While making the first episode, they planned to kill off PC Principal at the end and move on to something different the next week. But they liked the character, so they kept him. And the storylines kept accumulating. And by the end of the season, they had a continuous narrative that they hadn't exactly designed from the start. That lack of advanced planning shows in the finale. PC Principal Final Justice tries to resolve a dozen plot threads at once. PC Principal, the ads that have become sentient, Leslie the ad girl, the gentrification of the town, and it doesn't quite stick the landing. Some threads just disappear. The Whole Foods literally detaches from the ground and flies away. It's weird. It's the first time in a while that a South Park ending felt genuinely messy rather than deliberately absurd. And season 20 made the problem worse. This was the 2016 season, timed to the presidential election, with Mr. Garrison fully transformed into a Trump surrogate running against Hillary Clinton. The season committed to full serialization, with every episode feeding into a season-long narrative about internet trolling, nostalgia through the member berries, and the election. It was ambitious, it was timely, and then Donald Trump actually won. This is the story that every South Park fan knows. Parker and Stone had written the season assuming Hillary Clinton would win. When Trump won on Tuesday and South Park airs on Wednesday, they had to rewrite an entire episode overnight. The episode that had been titled The Very First Gentleman was scrapped and replaced with Oh Geez. The whole trajectory of the remaining season had to be recalibrated on the fly. And you know what? It kind of fell apart. I say that with love, and I say it knowing that making any television show under those conditions would be nearly impossible. But season 20 is widely regarded as one of the weakest in the show's history. Not because the individual jokes are bad, but because the serialized structure that was supposed to build to a satisfying conclusion simply couldn't recover from having its foundational premise collapse in real time. The member berries subplot petered out. Caitlyn Jenner, who had been a running character, vanished. Plot threads that had been carefully set up were abandoned. This is where a lot of fans draw the line. I've seen this over and over in fan communities, on Reddit, on the South Park subreddit, on forums, people saying South Park peaked at season X, and the number usually falls somewhere between 10 and 15, with season 20 being the point where even the most forgiving fans admit things went off the rails. But I think that's too simple, because what happened after season 20 was actually really interesting. Season 21, premiering September 13, 2017, partially walked back the serialization. It was more episodic than seasons 19 or 20, but still had some running threads. Cartman's relationship with Heidi Turner continued, for instance, and there were ongoing themes about white supremacy and social media. It wasn't a total return to form, but it was an acknowledgement that the fully serialized approach hadn't worked perfectly. And then came season 22, premiering September 26, 2018, which introduced the element that would define the next phase of South Park, Tegrity Farms. Randy Marsh moves his family out of town to start a marijuana farm, a decision that reshapes the entire dynamic of the show. Suddenly, Randy isn't just the wacky dad having a midlife crisis each episode. He's the central character of an ongoing storyline about legal weed, corporate greed, and the slow corruption of a man who started out wanting a simpler life. And this is where I need to have a real conversation with you, because Tegrity Farms is maybe the most divisive element in South Park's recent history. There are fans who love it. They love Randy's evolution from background dad to chaotic main character. They think his arc mirrors Trey Parker's own journey from young rebel to middle-aged parent trying to hold it together. They think the Tegrity episodes are some of the funniest the show has produced in years. And there are fans who hate it passionately. They feel that the focus on Randy has come at the expense of the core four boys. That Cartman, Kyle, Stan, and Kenny, the characters who defined the show for over 20 years, have been sidelined in favor of a character who was never supposed to be the lead. They feel that Tegrity Farms is an ongoing joke that stopped being funny 2 seasons ago, but won't go away. I'm somewhere in the middle, honestly. I think the best Tegrity episodes are legitimately great. Tegrity Farms Halloween Special from season 23 is a genuinely hilarious Shining parody, but I also think the concept has overstayed its welcome in the same way that any running gag eventually does if it goes on long enough. South Park's greatest strength has always been its ability to be about anything, to tackle any topic from any angle. When you anchor the show to a single recurring location and character, you sacrifice some of that flexibility. But here's what I think is the real issue, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot while making this video. The question of when did the golden age end isn't really about episode quality. It's about a feeling that the show has lost something. And what it's lost is the surprise. In the golden age, seasons 5 through 12, let's say, every new episode of South Park was an event. You had no idea what it was going to be about. It could be a parody of Lord of the Rings. It could be a meditation on the existence of God. It could be Cartman starting a boy band. It could be a shot-for-shot recreation of a disaster movie. The show was genuinely unpredictable in a way that made every Wednesday night feel exciting. And that unpredictability came from the production process. Because Trey and Matt were writing each episode a week before it aired, the audience literally couldn't predict what was coming. There were no leaked scripts, no advance reviews, no season trailers that gave everything away. You tuned in and got whatever they'd been thinking about that week. Sometimes it was brilliant, sometimes it was weird, but it was always a surprise. The serialization era changed that. When every episode feeds into a single narrative, you know roughly where things are heading. You know PC Principal is going to keep showing up. You know the election storyline is going to build to a climax. You know Tegrity Farms is going to be a thing. The individual episodes might still surprise you, but the overall trajectory is visible from a distance. And for a show that thrived on unpredictability, that visibility is costly. I think this is what people really mean when they say the golden age is over. Not that the jokes are worse, although some fans do mean that, but that the show feels different. It feels planned, considered, strategic. The wild, anarchic energy of the early seasons, the feeling that literally anything could happen at any moment, has been replaced by something more controlled, more mature, maybe, but also less electrifying. And look, I want to acknowledge something here. Part of this is just time. South Park has been on the air for almost 30 years. That's an insanely long time for any show, let alone one that produces new topical content on a weekly basis. The fact that it's still even watchable is remarkable. The fact that it still produces genuinely great episodes, and it does, regularly, is almost unprecedented. Think about where The Simpsons was in its 28th season. Think about where Family Guy was. South Park at 28 is vastly, overwhelmingly better than most of its peers at the same point in their run. So maybe the golden age didn't end. Maybe it just evolved. Maybe what we're watching now isn't a decline, but a second act. A mature period, like late career Bob Dylan or Radiohead after Kid A. Still excellent, still vital, but different in a way that some fans mourn. I've been going back and forth on this for weeks, and I think the answer I've landed on is this. South Park has had 2 golden ages, with a messy transition period in between. The first golden age is seasons 4 or 5 through 12 or 13, roughly 2000 to 2009. This is the era of standalone satirical episodes, of Scott Tenerman Must Die, and Make Love, Not Warcraft, and Trapped in the Closet, and Imagination Land. This is when the show was at the peak of its powers as an episodic satirical machine, firing on all cylinders every week, tackling new topics with fearless precision, and leaving scorch marks on the cultural landscape. The transition period is seasons 14 through 17, 2010 to 2013. Still good, sometimes great, but you can feel the show searching for a new identity. The boys are aging, metaphorically, since they never actually age. The cultural landscape is shifting. Social media is changing how news and outrage work. Parker and Stone are getting older, and their interests are evolving. This is the era of You're Getting Old and the Black Friday trilogy, episodes that are self-aware about the show's place in the world and its own aging process. And the second golden age if you'll indulge me, starts with Season 19's introduction of PC Principle and extends through the Paramount Plus specials and the current era. Now, I know a lot of people will push back on this. How can Seasons 19 through 27 be a golden age when Season 20 is right there? Fair point. But I think the overall trajectory of the show in this era, the willingness to experiment with format, the deeper character work, the special episodes, the return to bolder political satire in Seasons 27 and 28 constitutes a genuine renaissance. The Paramount Plus specials, especially, represent South Park at an ambitious scale it had never attempted before. Post-COVID, the first special, released November 25th, 2021, imagines the boys as adults in a post-pandemic world, and it's simultaneously funny, emotionally resonant, and surprisingly touching. The Streaming Wars digs into the absurdity of the entertainment industry's pivot to streaming. These aren't just extended episodes, they're genuinely different things, with expanded runtimes and more complex narratives than the show typically allows. And then there's the deal. In August 2021, Parker and Stone signed a deal reportedly worth $900 million with Viacom CBS to extend the show through at least 2027 and produce 14 films for Paramount Plus, $900 million, for a show about construction paper children saying dirty words. And then in July 2025, they signed a new deal worth approximately $1.5 billion to make 50 new episodes through 2030, with the entire series streaming exclusively on Paramount Plus. These numbers are insane. They represent a level of institutional confidence in the South Park brand that is almost without precedent in television history, and they mean that Parker and Stone are locked in for at least another several years of new content, with the creative freedom and the financial security to do basically whatever they want. Season 27, which premiered in 2025, came out swinging. The premiere, Sermon on the Mount, depicted Donald Trump in an extremely unflattering light, wandering the desert and ending up in bed with Satan himself. It addressed censorship, corporate interference, and the current political climate with the kind of fearless, nothing is sacred energy that South Park hadn't consistently deployed in years. It felt like a return to the show's core identity. Like Parker and Stone were saying, we're not done yet. We're not tired. We still have things to say, and we still don't give a damn who we offend saying them. At a 2025 San Diego Comic-Con panel, Parker joked about the reaction to the premiere. We're terribly sorry. When asked about future episodes, Stone deadpanned. No politics. None of that shit. The audience laughed. Everyone knew he was lying. So here we are, late 2025 into 2026. South Park is approaching its 30th anniversary. It has produced over 330 episodes, multiple specials, a feature film, a Broadway musical based on its creative DNA, 2 video games, and enough cultural impact to fill a university course. And the question of its golden age remains as fiercely debated as ever. Here's my take, and I know I've been building to this for a while, so let me just lay it out plainly. The golden age of South Park never really ended. It changed. It evolved. It went through a rough patch in the late teens and season 20. But the core of what makes South Park great, the willingness to say the unsayable, the speed of the production cycle, the refusal to treat any topic as too sacred to mock, the genuine emotional intelligence hidden beneath the crude exterior, all of that is still present. It was present in You're Getting Old. It was present in Banned in China in season 23, which got the show banned in China for criticizing the Chinese government's censorship of the entertainment industry. It was present in the post-COVID specials, and it's present in the current season. What ended is a specific era, the era of standalone episodic satire at its peak intensity. That was seasons 5 through 12 or 13, and it was extraordinary, and nothing else on television has ever matched it. That era ended because the world changed, because the creators changed, and because you can't sustain that level of output forever without evolving. But evolution isn't death, and the people who say South Park's golden age ended in 2008 or 2010 or whenever are looking at it the wrong way. They're comparing current South Park to their memory of peak South Park, and current South Park will always lose that comparison because memory is kind and nostalgia is a hell of a drug. The member berries were right about that, at least. If you want to experience the golden age, the heart of it, the absolute best the show has ever been, watch seasons 5 through 11. Start with Scott Tenerman Must Die, and don't stop until Imagination Land is over. By the end, you'll understand why this show matters, why it survived for almost 30 years, why two guys from Colorado with a box of construction paper changed what animated television could be. And if you want to see what the golden age evolved into, what it looks like when a great show matures instead of dying, watch the Paramount Plus specials. Watch season 27. Watch the current episodes. They're not the same as what came before. They can't be, but they're still alive in a way that almost nothing else on television can claim after this long. I keep coming back to that moment in You're Getting Old. Stan lying on the bed, everything looking like shit, the credits rolling in silence. And I think about how some fans watched that episode and thought, yeah, that's how I feel about the show now. Everything about it looks like shit to me. But here's what those fans might be missing. The episode wasn't actually about South Park being shit. It was about Stan being depressed. It was about the danger of cynicism, of letting your critical eye destroy your ability to enjoy things. The show wasn't saying South Park is over. It was saying, if you can't enjoy anything anymore, the problem might not be with the thing. The problem might be with you. That's not a comfortable message. It's not what you want to hear when you're rewatching old seasons and wondering why the new ones don't hit the same way. But it might be the truest thing the show has ever said. The golden age of South Park isn't a period of time. It's a state of mind. It's the willingness to sit down, shut your cynicism off for 22 minutes, and let these crude little paper cutout children show you something you haven't seen before. And if you can still do that, even after 300 episodes, even after almost 30 years, then the golden age is still going. It never ended. We just got older. And honestly, if you've made it this far into this video, you know that already. You know that the person who sits through a multi-hour deep dive into the evolution of an animated comedy isn't a casual viewer. You're here because South Park means something to you, because it was there for you at some point in your life when you needed to laugh, or when you needed someone to say the thing nobody else would say, or when you needed to feel like someone else out there saw the world the same way you did. And it's still here. It's different now, but it's still here. If you can't sleep after all of that, well, that's what the next video is for. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight. It means more than you probably realize. And if you haven't subscribed yet, seriously, do it. We're going to keep making these for as long as there's South Park to talk about, and based on the current deal, that's going to be a very long time. Good night, and remember, they killed Kenny again this week, those bastards. And you know what? I realize I rushed through some of the most important parts of this story. I rattled off episode titles and season numbers like I was reading a Wikipedia page, and that's not what this channel is about. So let me go back, let me go deeper, because some of these episodes deserve more than a passing mention, and some of these eras deserve more than a summary. Let me tell you about season 6 properly, because season 6, which ran from March 6th to December 11th, 2002, with 17 episodes, is the season that doesn't get enough credit. Everyone talks about season 5 because of Scott Tenorman, and everyone talks about seasons 8 and 10 because of the Emmy-winning episodes. But season 6 is where the show proved it could survive losing one of its main characters, and in doing so, it became something richer. Kenny was dead. Like, actually dead. Not coming back next week dead. Gone. And the show had to figure out what it was without him. And what happened was fascinating. The remaining 3 boys tried to replace him with Butters, which didn't work because Butters is too pure for that role. Then they tried Tweak, the twitchy coffee kid, and that didn't work either. And eventually they just stopped trying. They became a trio for a while, and the show's dynamics shifted in subtle but important ways. The new Terrence and Philip movie trailer, season 6, Episode 5, aired April 3rd, 2002, is a perfect example of how the show was operating in this era. The entire episode is about the boys trying to watch a movie trailer. That's it. That's the whole plot. They need to see this trailer. And increasingly absurd obstacles keep getting in their way. It sounds like nothing, and on paper it is nothing, but the execution is so tight, the escalation so perfectly paced, that it's one of the funniest episodes they've ever done. It's pure comedy craftsmanship. No message, no satire. Just 4 kids desperately wanting to see a commercial for a movie about fart jokes. And that's something people forget about the Golden Age. It wasn't all sharp social commentary and devastating emotional beats. Sometimes it was just silly. Sometimes the funniest episodes are the ones that aren't trying to say anything at all. Fun Times with Weapons. That's season 8, episode 1, where the boys buy ninja weapons at a fair, and the episode switches to anime-style animation whenever they imagine themselves as warriors. That episode isn't making a point about Japanese culture, or martial arts, or anything. It's just hilarious. It captures the specific feeling of being a kid with a new toy, imagining yourself as something impossibly cool, and the gap between that fantasy and reality is where all the comedy lives. I think about this a lot when I'm putting these videos together, like 3 in the morning, staring at my screen, trying to articulate what makes a good South Park episode good. And I think there's a tension in the show between 2 impulses. There's the impulse to be meaningful, to say something about the world, to use these paper cutout children as vehicles for social commentary. And there's the impulse to just be funny, to tell a joke, to make you laugh so hard you choke on whatever you're eating. And the golden age is when both impulses were firing simultaneously, often within the same episode, sometimes within the same scene. Take Raisins, Season 7, Episode 14, aired December 10th, 2003. This is the episode where Stan gets dumped by Wendy and becomes a goth, while Butters falls in love with a waitress at a Hooters-style restaurant for kids called Raisin. On the surface, it's a parody of the restaurant industry and teen romance tropes. But underneath, it's one of the show's most honest explorations of heartbreak and emotional resilience. Butters, after learning that the waitress was just being nice for tips and never actually liked him, gives a speech that is, and I don't say this lightly, genuinely profound. He says something along the lines of, being sad is okay, because it means you felt something real, and he'd rather feel sad than feel nothing at all. From Butters, the kid who gets grounded for breathing wrong, the kid whose mom tried to drown him, this sweet, perpetually victimized child delivers one of the most emotionally mature monologues the show has ever produced. And it's not played as a joke. It's the emotional climax of the episode. And it lands perfectly, because the show has earned it through 20 minutes of comedy. That tonal control, the ability to be hilariously irreverent and genuinely moving within the same episode, is the signature of Golden Age South Park, Jimmy Valmer too. Let me talk about Jimmy for a second, because he doesn't get enough love. Jimmy was introduced in Season 5's Cripple Fight, aired June 27, 2001, as a new kid with crutches who does stand-up comedy, and he immediately became one of the show's most reliable sources of both humor and heart. The best Jimmy moment in the entire series might be in Raisins, actually, when he's trying to tell Wendy that she's a continuing source of inspiration to Stan, but his stutter makes the words come out sounding like the worst insult imaginable. The timing of that scene is absolutely surgical. Every pause, every syllable, every cut to Wendy's increasingly horrified face. It's comedy at its most precisely engineered. This is the kind of thing that doesn't happen in the early seasons. Seasons 1 through 3 don't have the character depth to pull off a scene like that. You need years of established relationships, of knowing who these characters are and how they interact, for a stuttered compliment to become the funniest moment in a whole season. That's what building a world over time buys you, and it's one of the reasons the Golden Age hits so much harder than the early years. Okay, I keep circling back, so let me push forward into the seasons I rushed through earlier. Season 9. I mentioned Trapped in the Closet and Best Friends Forever, but there's so much more in this season that deserves attention. The Losing Edge, Season 9, Episode 5, aired April 6, 2005, might be my single favorite South Park episode. And I know that's a weird pick because it's not usually in the top 5 of any official ranking, but here's why I love it. The boys' Little League team keeps winning, and they hate it. They don't want to play baseball anymore. They want their summer back, so they try to lose on purpose. But every team they face is also trying to lose, because nobody wants to play summer baseball. And they keep accidentally winning because the other teams are even worse at throwing games than they are. Meanwhile, Randy Marsh is getting into drunken brawls at every game, treating Little League like it's the World Cup. And the B-plot with Randy becomes arguably more memorable than the main story. Randy fighting increasingly random opponents at every venue, with the kids' game happening in the background, while the real drama unfolds in the parking lot. It's a masterclass in how to run parallel storylines, where the comedy from each elevates the other. This is also where Randy starts his evolution from background character to potential lead. In the first few seasons, Randy was just Stan's dad. He had a few lines here and there. But starting around season 8 or 9, the writers realized they had something with Randy. A character who embodied the specific kind of middle-aged American male idiocy that Trey Parker was increasingly finding hilarious. The dad who becomes obsessed with whatever trend is happening. The dad who handles every situation in the most destructive way possible. The dad who deep down is just a kid who never grew up, trapped in an adult's body with adult responsibilities he doesn't want. And I think a lot of why fans struggle with the "when did the golden age end" question has to do with Randy, because Randy's ascension mirrors the show's own evolution. And if you prefer the kids-focused episodes, Randy's increasing prominence feels like a loss. But if you're watching as a 35 or 40-year-old, as Parker and Stone now are, were when they started leaning into Randy, his storylines resonate in a completely different way. He's not replacing the kids. He's reflecting the fact that the creators aren't kids anymore either. Medicinal Fried Chicken, Season 14, Episode 3, aired March 31st, 2010, is peak Randy. He gives himself testicular cancer to qualify for a medical marijuana card, and his testicles swell to the size of exercise balls. He bounces through town on them. It's the most absurd visual gag imaginable, and it's also a sharp commentary on how the medical marijuana system was being gamed in states that had legalized it. Cartman, meanwhile, is running a black market KFC operation after the town's last KFC is replaced by a dispensary, in a subplot that parodies Scarface beat for beat. The episode is operating on about 5 levels simultaneously, and every single one of them works. But you know what? I've been talking for a long time now, and I haven't addressed something that I think matters: the production side of the Golden Age. Because the Golden Age isn't just about the writing, it's about the entire system that makes the writing possible. The very first episode of South Park, the pilot, was the only episode animated almost entirely with traditional construction paper stop motion. After that, the show moved to computer animation, initially using Power Animator and later Maya, but designed to look like paper cutouts. This is important because it's what makes the 6-day turnaround possible. You can't do stop motion animation in 6 days, but you can render computer animations that looks like stop motion, and that technological choice is what gives South Park its superpower. The show transitioned from standard definition to HD in season 13, which premiered in March 2009. Every previous season was later re-rendered in 16:9 widescreen and released on Blu-ray, all of them except the pilot, which retains its original 4:3 aspect ratio because it was the only episode actually made with paper. That re-rendering process also meant some early episodes got their uncensored audio tracks restored, which is a detail only obsessive fans would know about. But it's the kind of thing that shows how much care has gone into the show's archive. And the voice acting. I don't think people appreciate enough how much of the show's success comes from the voice acting. Trey Parker voices Stan, Cartman, Mr. Garrison, Randy, Mr. Mackey, and dozens of other characters. Matt Stone voices Kyle, Kenny, Butters, Gerald Broflovsky, Jimbo, and his own army of minor characters. The two of them, plus a small supporting cast, April Stewart and Mona Marshall, being the primary female voices after the tragic death of Mary Kay Bergman in 1999, produce a show with hundreds of distinct, memorable characters. That range is insane when you think about it. Parker has to go from Cartman's whiny manipulation to Randy's oblivious enthusiasm to Mr. Mackey's mk to Mr. Garrison's southern drawl to Stan's earnest sincerity, sometimes within the same scene. And he does the recording live, in a booth, the day before the episode airs, often still changing lines as the animation is being finalized. The performances feel spontaneous because they literally are spontaneous. Here's something I've been wanting to bring up that I don't think anyone else has talked about in quite this way. There's a theory I have about why the Golden Age feels so golden, and it has to do with the gap between what the audience expects and what the show delivers. In the early seasons, people expected crude humor and shock value, and that's mostly what they got. By season 4 or 5, the audience had recalibrated their expectations. They knew the show could be crude and shocking, so now the show had to exceed those expectations. And it did so by becoming smart, by becoming emotionally complex, by using the crude exterior as camouflage for genuinely sophisticated storytelling. But here's the thing about expectation. They keep adjusting. By season 12 or 13, the audience expected South Park to be smart and timely and emotionally resonant. Those things were no longer surprising. They were the baseline. And so the show had to work harder and harder to exceed expectations that it had raised itself. That's the trap of excellence. Once you've established that you're great, merely being great isn't enough anymore. You have to be better than great. You have to surprise people who already expect to be surprised. I think that's why some fans place the Golden Age's end around season 12 or 13. Not because the quality dropped. I genuinely don't think it did, not significantly, but because the gap between expectation and delivery narrowed. The show was still hitting targets, but the targets weren't surprising anymore. And in a show that thrives on surprise, that's a real problem. This is something that happens to every long-running creative work, by the way. The Beatles hit this wall. Radiohead hit this wall. Breaking Bad, which only ran 5 seasons, arguably hit it in the final stretch. The first time you blow someone's mind, you get credit for it. The 100th time, they shrug and say, yeah, that's what you do. South Park has blown our minds so many times that we've become immune to having our minds blown. And we blame the show for that, when really, it's our own expectations that have changed. Let me zoom into the later Golden Age for a minute, the period I've been calling seasons 14 through 17, because I think there are specific moments in this era that deserve to be recognized as among the show's best work, even if they don't carry the same cultural impact as Scott Tenerman or Make Love, Not Warcraft. You Have Zero Friends, Season 14, Episode 4, aired April 7, 2010, is a devastating parody of Facebook culture that uses the visual language of Tron to tell a story about how social media turns human connection into a numbers game. Stan gets sucked into Facebook and has to fight his own profile, which has become an entity that exists independently of him. In 2010, this felt slightly ahead of its time. In 2025, it feels prophetic. The episode predicted the alienation and identity fragmentation that social media would cause long before most people were talking about it. Fish Sticks, Season 13, Episode 5, aired April 8, 2009, is the episode where Jimmy invents a hilarious joke about fish sticks and gay fish, and Cartman gradually convinces himself that he helped write the joke when he didn't contribute at all. It's a brilliant parody of how credit and ego work in creative partnerships, and it features one of the most savage celebrity portrayals in the show's history, Kanye West, who doesn't understand that the joke is about him because the pun relies on a level of self-awareness he simply doesn't possess. What kills me about this episode is that Kanye West reportedly loved it. He posted about it on his blog at the time, saying something like he needed to be better about taking jokes. That's the power of South Park's satire when it works. Even the target can recognize the truth in it. Coon vs. Coon and Friends, the three-part saga from Season 14, Episodes 11 through 13, takes the superhero parody that started with The Coon in Season 13 and expands it into a full mythology that includes Cthulhu, BP's Deepwater Horizon oil spill, and a genuine revelation about Kenny's immortality. We learn in this trilogy that Kenny can't actually die permanently. He dies and is reborn every time, but nobody remembers it happening. His parents know, but have stopped caring. The horror of being immortal in a world where nobody notices or cares about your deaths is played for both comedy and genuine pathos, and it retroactively adds depth to every single Kenny death in the show's history. That moment, when you realize that Kenny's deaths, which started as a throwaway gag in 1997, have been quietly building toward this revelation for 14 years, is the kind of long game storytelling that most shows can't even attempt. And it happened almost accidentally. Parker and Stone didn't plan Kenny's immortality from the beginning. They discovered it retroactively and wove it into the fabric of the show so seamlessly that it feels like it was always there. I actually have a theory about this that I've never heard anyone else bring up. I think the Kenny is immortal and nobody remembers reveal is the show's way of addressing its own relationship with the reset button. South Park resets at the end of every episode. Characters die, cities get destroyed, the status quo gets obliterated, and then next week, everything's back to normal. By making Kenny literally embody that reset, by making it a verifiable in-universe phenomenon, the show is winking at the audience. It's saying, yes, we know nothing we do has permanent consequences. But what if that was a source of pain rather than convenience? What if being trapped in an endless cycle of death and rebirth was actually a kind of hell? That's heavy stuff for a show about paper cutout children, but that's what the Golden Age gives you. Layer upon layer of meaning, hidden beneath fart jokes and racial slurs. Season 11, which I sort of glossed over earlier, deserves more time. This is the Imagination Land season, yes, but it's also the season of Night of the Living Homeless, a brilliant zombie parody where homeless people shamble through town asking for change, and Guitar Queer O, which parodies Guitar Hero and the nature of friendship when success makes one partner famous and leaves the other behind. It's also the season of D-Yikes, where Mrs. Garrison goes to a lesbian bar and the entire subplot is a shot-for-shot recreation of the movie 300 with the bar patrons defending their establishment against Persian-style invaders. That's the kind of completely unhinged creative choice that only South Park would make, and only Golden Age South Park would make work. With apologies to Jesse Jackson, Season 11, Episode 1, aired March 7, 2007, opens with Randy saying the N-word on Wheel of Fortune, uncensored, on camera. And the rest of the episode deals with the fallout. Not in a preachy, after-school special way, but in a characteristically South Park way, where every character's response reveals something true about how America deals with race. Randy's apology tour is excruciatingly funny, because it captures the specific performative quality of public contrition. And there's a whole subplot where a little person fights Cartman because Cartman won't stop making height jokes, which is simultaneously about the episode's theme and its own thing entirely. This episode aired at the height of the Don Imus controversy, by the way. Imus had called the Rutgers women's basketball team nappy-headed hoes, and the national conversation about who gets to say what was at a fever pitch. South Park's response was, everybody's being ridiculous about this, and the word itself has power only because we give it power. Whether you agree with that take or not, the show at least had the guts to make the argument in the most confrontational way possible by having its most prominent character say the word on national television within the first minute of the episode. That kind of fearlessness is central to the Golden Age identity, and I think it's something the show has had to calibrate calibrate carefully as the culture has shifted. In 2007, having Randy say the N-word on TV was shocking but defensible. The episode was clearly satirizing racism, not promoting it. In 2015 or 2020, the same scene would read very differently. The show knows this. That's part of why later seasons feel different. Not because Parker and Stone have gotten soft, but because the cultural context they operate in has changed, and they're smart enough to know that the same joke lands differently in different eras. Let me talk about one more thing before I start wrapping this section up. The Peabody Award. South Park won a Peabody Award in 2005, one of the most prestigious awards in electronic media. The citation said the show, in the process of unapologetically ridiculing individuals and groups, pushes viewers to confront broader issues such as racism, war, mob mentality, consumerism, and religious fanaticism. And at the ceremony, Parker and Stone used their acceptance speech to talk about how great Battlestar Galactica was. They literally spent their Peabody speech recommending another show. That right there encapsulates everything I love about these guys. They won one of the highest honors in their industry, and their response was to promote someone else's work. Not because they were being humble. Parker and Stone are many things, but falsely humble isn't one of them. But because they genuinely couldn't take the ceremony seriously. They're the same guys who showed up to the 2000 Oscars wearing dresses. Parker in a replica of Jennifer Lopez's green Versace dress. Stone in an outfit inspired by Gwyneth Paltrow, while reportedly on LSD. The same guys who responded to Scientology's threats by calling themselves servants of the Dark Lord Xenu. The same guys who, when asked if drugs were involved in making South Park, said no. Caffeine is the biggest South Park drug. They're not rebels in a calculated, marketing-driven way. They're rebels because they genuinely don't care about the machinery of Hollywood prestige. And that energy, that we're just two guys from Colorado who think this is funny energy, is what powers the Golden Age. It's what makes the show feel alive in a way that more polished, more calculated shows don't. When that energy fades, when the show starts to feel calculated, or strategic, or safe, that's when people say the Golden Age is over. And I think that perception, whether or not it's fair, is what drives the debate. Let me come back to the timeline. I've been all over the place, which is kind of how these videos work. I go where the thoughts take me, and I trust you to follow along. But I want to make sure I'm covering the chronology clearly. The transition from the unambiguous Golden Age to whatever comes next isn't a single moment. It's a gradual shift that happens over several seasons, and different fans notice it at different points. Some fans point to the departure of Chef in season 10 as a turning point, and I think there's something to that. Chef was the show's moral center, the one adult the kids could talk to, the one who would explain things to them in a way that was inappropriate but honest. Without him, the kids lost their anchor, and the show had to find other ways to ground its storytelling. Some fans point to the switch to HD in season 13 as the moment the show lost its charm. The widescreen format, the cleaner lines, the brighter colors. It all felt like a different show visually. I don't put too much stock in this argument, personally, because I think the writing quality didn't change with the visual upgrade. But I understand the sentiment. The look of South Park is part of its identity, and changing that look, even in a technically positive way, can feel like a loss. Some fans point to You're Getting Old as both the peak and the beginning of the end. The episode where the show finally acknowledged its own fatigue, and in doing so, unlocked something beautiful, but also signaled that the creators were running out of steam. Again, I think this reading is incomplete, but I understand it. And some fans, probably the largest group, point to the serialization era starting in season 18 or 19 as the definitive end of the Golden Age. Their argument is that South Park's strength was always in its standalone episodes, in its ability to be about anything from one week to the next, and that serialization sacrificed that flexibility for a novelistic structure that the show's production process wasn't designed to support. I've already given my opinion on this. I think the Golden Age evolved rather than ended, and I think we're potentially in a second Golden Age now. But I want to acknowledge that every one of these perspectives has validity. The show has changed, repeatedly, significantly, sometimes for the better and sometimes not, and how you feel about those changes depends on what you value most about South Park. If you value the anarchic energy and the shock of the new, the Golden Age ended around season 5 or 6, when the show transitioned from pure chaos to structured satire. If you value the satirical precision, it ended around season 12 or 13, when the targets became predictable. If you value the emotional depth, it ended with You're Getting Old. If you value the standalone format, it ended with serialization. And if you value the sheer fearlessness of the show's willingness to go after anyone and anything, well, season 27 is out here putting Donald Trump in bed with Satan. So maybe that never ended at all. I think the most honest answer is that South Park has had multiple golden ages. Or maybe that golden age is the wrong framing entirely. It implies a peak followed by a decline. And I don't think that's what happened. What happened is more like metamorphosis. The caterpillar didn't die, it became a butterfly. And butterflies are different from caterpillars, but they're not worse. Okay, I'm going to start winding this down, but I have one more thing I want to talk about, and it's the thing I've been thinking about the most while putting this video together. I've been rewatching South Park episodes almost non-stop for the last few weeks, probably 40 or 50 episodes across different eras. And the thing that struck me most wasn't the quality difference between eras, it was the consistency. The voice is the same, the sensibility is the same, the willingness to be gross and smart and funny and mean and tender and absurd, often all at once, that hasn't changed. The ingredients are the same. The recipe has evolved, but the kitchen is the same kitchen, with the same chefs, using the same fundamental approach they've been using since 1997. And I think that's the real answer to the question in the title of this video. When did South Park's golden age really end? It didn't. It's an ongoing golden age, with peaks and valleys, evolutions, and growing pains, brilliant experiments, and noble failure. It's a show that has been on the air for almost 30 years, and is still capable of producing episodes that make you laugh harder than anything else on television, that make you think about things you weren't expecting to think about, that make you feel things you weren't expecting to feel. If that's not a golden age, I don't know what is. And if you're watching this at 3 in the morning and you can't sleep, maybe put on Casa Bonita, or Make Love, Not Warcraft, or Raisins, or You're Getting Old, or honestly, any episode from any era. Because the golden age of South Park is whatever era you need it to be, on whatever night you need it most. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight, genuinely. These long-form videos take weeks to put together, and knowing that people actually sit through them, or fall asleep to them, which is equally fine, that's literally the point, is what keeps this channel going. If you've made it this far, and you still haven't subscribed, I don't even know what to tell you. Do it, hit the bell. We've got a lot more South Park to talk about, and I'm not running out of things to say that anytime soon. Good night, Papertown, and remember, you don't have to pick a golden age. You can just love the whole thing, except maybe Jacovosaur. Nobody has to love Jacovosaur. Actually, wait, I'm not done. I said I was winding down, but I'm not. Because there are entire sections of this story that I haven't covered yet, and if you're still here, and I hope you are, or I hope you're comfortably drifting off to sleep, and this is just pleasant background noise for you, then I owe you the full picture. Let me go back and talk about something I've only touched on briefly, the cultural fallout. Because South Park's golden age wasn't just about what happened on screen. It was about what happened in the real world, because of what happened on screen. I mentioned the Scientology episode and Isaac Hayes' departure, and I mentioned the Muhammad episodes and the death threats. But the full scope of South Park's real-world impact during the Golden Age is staggering. Let me give you a few examples I haven't mentioned yet. In 1999, during the first season's run, the Parents Television Council called South Park the most dangerous show on television. They said it doesn't just push the envelope, it knocks it off the table. This was the same organization that was leading campaigns against Howard Stern and the WWE, and basically anything on television they considered morally corrupting. And they singled out South Park as the worst of the worst. Trey Parker's response, characteristically, was to make fun of them in subsequent episodes. In 2002, after Jared Has AIDS, Season 6, Episode 1, aired March 6th, which depicted Subway spokesperson Jared Fogle losing weight through liposuction, and then starting a charity to give AIDS to children, with the entire joke being the homophone between AIDS and AIDS. There was a significant backlash from organizations working in HIV/AIDS awareness. The show didn't apologize. It never apologizes. And years later, when Jared Fogle was actually convicted of child exploitation, the episode took on an entirely different, deeply uncomfortable resonance. South Park has an uncanny, almost unsettling ability to mock people who later turn out to be genuinely terrible. They went after Michael Jackson years before the Leaving Neverland documentary. They mocked Bill Cosby long before the sexual assault conviction. Whether that's prescience or just the law of averages when you mock everyone is debatable, but the track record is remarkable. Steve Irwin showed up at Satan's Halloween Party in Hell on Earth 2006, Season 10, Episode 11, aired October 25th, 2006, with a stingray barb still embedded in his chest. This was less than 2 months after Irwin's actual death on September 4th, 2006. The joke was that even Satan thought it was in poor taste. Too soon, he says when he sees Irwin. It was brutal, and it was exactly the kind of thing that made Golden Age South Park so polarizing. You either laughed or you were horrified, and the show genuinely didn't care which. And then there's the matter of the word shit. It Hits the Fan, the Season 5 premiere, used the word shit uncensored 162 times in a single episode. This was 2001. The FCC was still actively fining broadcasters for profanity. Cable networks were technically exempt from FCC regulation, but the cultural expectation was still that certain words wouldn't be said on television. South Park's response was to say one particular word so many times that it became meaningless, which was, of course, the entire point of the episode. The episode was about how using a taboo word repeatedly robs it of its power, and the show demonstrated this by making the audience hear shit so many times that by the end, it had no impact at all. The medium was the message. That level of meta-awareness, using the form of the show to make the show's point, is something I don't think South Park gets enough credit for. It's not just satire, it's structural satire. The way the show is made, the way it's aired, the way it interacts with its audience, all of it becomes part of the commentary. When they air an episode about the Muhammad controversy and Comedy Central censors it, the censorship itself becomes the statement. When they make an episode in 6 days that comments on something that happened 4 days ago, the speed of the response is the statement. The production process isn't separate from the art. It is the art. This is what I think people mean when they say South Park is a living show. It exists in real time. It responds to the world in real time. And during the golden age, that responsiveness was at its most exhilarating because the world was giving them incredible material and they had the tools and the talent to process it almost instantly. The Iraq War gave them I'm a Little Bit Country, Season 7, Episode 4, aired April 9th, 2003, which tackled the pro-war versus anti-war debate by having the town split into two factions that eventually realize they need each other. The pro-war side gives America the freedom to do whatever it wants, while the anti-war side gives America the appearance of moral conscience. Both are performative, both are necessary, and neither actually cares about the people affected by the war itself. That's a sophisticated, genuinely insightful argument about the nature of American foreign policy debate, delivered through an episode where Cartman gives himself a concussion to travel back in time to the Founding Fathers. Hurricane Katrina gave them 2 days before the day after tomorrow. Season 9, Episode 8, aired October 19, 2005, which used a parody of the disaster movie The Day After Tomorrow to skewer the media's response to the hurricane and the blame shifting that followed it. Stan and Cartman accidentally destroy a beaver dam, causing a flood, and refuse to take responsibility, just as politicians and media figures were refusing to take responsibility for the Katrina response. The episode includes a moment where Cartman asks Kyle if he caused the flood because he's Jewish, and Kyle's exasperated response captures the absurdity of the real-world scapegoating that was happening at the time. The Terry Scavo case gave them Best Friends Forever, the Emmy-winning Season 9 episode I mentioned earlier, which aired the literal day Scavo died. The timing was almost supernatural. They had written and produced the episode knowing the case was ongoing, and the episode's broadcast happened to coincide with one of the most significant moments in the controversy. That's not planning. That's the production cycle being fast enough to catch lightning in a bottle. And the rise of social media gave them, eventually, Grounded Vindaloop, Season 18, Episode 7, aired November 12, 2014, which used Oculus Rift virtual reality as a framework for an episode about not knowing what's real anymore. This was years before the metaverse became a mainstream concept. And the episode's central anxiety, what if the reality you're experiencing isn't the real one? What if you're trapped in layers of simulation? Reads even better now than it did then. I keep saying this, but I mean it every time. The Golden Age wasn't just about the jokes. It was about the show's ability to process the world faster and more honestly than any other creative work on television. And that ability, which came from the production cycle, from Parker and Stone's specific brand of genius, from the show's visual simplicity, enabling narrative complexity, is what made the Golden Age feel golden. Here's where I want to get really personal for a second. And I know this is a long video, and maybe you're asleep by now, and that's fine. If you're sleeping, I hope this is helping. But for those of you still awake, I want to tell you something about what South Park has meant to me personally. I came to South Park late. I wasn't there for the premiere in 1997. I wasn't watching every Wednesday night in the early 2000s. I discovered the show through reruns and DVDs, binging seasons out of order, piecing together the continuity from fragments. And because of that, I never had the experience of watching the Golden Age unfold in real time. I experienced it retroactively. I watched Scott Tenerman Must Die, knowing the twist. I watched Make Love Not Warcraft, knowing it won an Emmy. I watched Trapped in the Closet, knowing about the Scientology controversy. And you know what? It was still incredible. The episodes didn't lose their power because I knew what was coming. The jokes were still funny. The satire was still sharp. The emotional moments still hit. And that, I think, is the strongest argument for the Golden Age being genuinely golden. It holds up. It's not just nostalgia. It's not just you had to be there. You can watch those episodes today, right now, for the first time, and they'll land. Not all of the topical references will be clear. You might need to Google who Terry Schiavo was, or what the Passion of the Christ controversy was about, but the underlying observations about human nature are timeless. Cartman's sociopathy is timeless. The tension between Stan's idealism and Kyle's skepticism is timeless. Butter's innocence in a corrupted world is timeless. Kenny's silent endurance of suffering is timeless. Randy's desperate attempts to recapture his youth are timeless. These aren't characters tied to a specific era. They're archetypes. And that's why the Golden Age, whatever period you define it as, has staying power that most television from the same era doesn't. Try watching a Simpsons episode from 2005. Not a classic one, a random one from that era. It'll be fine. It might even be good, but it won't feel alive the way a South Park episode from 2005 feels alive. Because South Park was always responding to something real, something happening right now, and that urgency bleeds through even decades later. The specific news stories may have faded, but the emotional truth the show extracted from them remain. Let me make one more argument for why the Golden Age debate matters, and then I'll really start wrapping this up. I promise. The Golden Age debate matters because it's really a debate about what South Park is for. If you think South Park's primary purpose is to be the most fearless, most offensive, most boundary-pushing show on television, then the Golden Age ended when the culture shifted to make that role harder to play. If you think South Park's purpose is to be the sharpest satirical voice in American media, then the Golden Age is tied to the quality of the satire and might still be ongoing. If you think South Park's purpose is to make you laugh until you can't breathe, then the Golden Age is whichever season makes you personally laugh the hardest. And here's the thing, South Park has been all of those things at different times, sometimes in the same episode. And the Golden Age is the period when it was doing all of them simultaneously, at the highest level with the most consistency. For me, that period starts with Scott Tenerman Must Die in July 2001 and runs through Imagination Land in December 2007. 6.5 years, about 90 episodes, an extraordinary run by any measure, but it didn't end there. It evolved. And the evolution has produced its own great moments, its own innovations, its own reasons to keep watching. The serialization experiment, the Paramount Plus specials, the return to political fearlessness in the current season. These aren't the same as the Golden Age, but they're still South Park, still Trey Parker and Matt Stone, still made in 6 days, still willing to go where other shows won't. And as long as that's true, as long as two guys from Colorado are still staying up all night in a studio in Los Angeles, panicking that the episode isn't funny enough, fighting with Comedy Central over which swear words they can keep, and somehow delivering something brilliant just hours before airtime, the Golden Age isn't over. It's just in a different chapter. Alright, now I'm really winding down, for real this time. If you're new to South Park and this video has inspired you to watch the show, here's my recommended starting point. Don't start with season 1. I know that's controversial, but Trey Parker himself would tell you the same thing. Start with season 4 or 5. Watch Scott Tenerman Must Die. If that episode grabs you, and it will, I promise it will, then work your way forward through the Golden Age. Then go back and watch the early seasons with the context of knowing what the show becomes. They'll be more interesting that way. If you're a longtime fan who hasn't watched in years, pick up wherever you left off. The show is different now, but it's still good. Give the Paramount Plus specials a chance. Give the current season a chance. You might be surprised. And if you're a diehard who's been watching since 1997 and has opinions about every single episode, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment. Tell me where you draw the Golden Age line. Tell me I'm wrong about something. Tell me about the episode that changed your mind about the show. This conversation doesn't end with this video. It's ongoing, just like South Park itself. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for caring about this ridiculous, offensive, brilliant, heartbreaking, disgusting, beautiful show about 4 kids in a small Colorado town. Thank you for being the kind of person who watches a multi-hour video essay about animated television at whatever ungodly hour you're watching this. And if you can't sleep, well, that's what the next video is for. Subscribe to Paper Town, leave a like, and I'll see you next time. Good night, everyone. Sleep well. Dream of construction paper mountains and a quiet little town where anything can happen. And they killed Kenny, you bastards. Actually, one more thing. I lied about being done. I keep doing this, but I'm lying on my couch right now, thinking about episodes I haven't covered, and there are too many good ones to leave out. So consider this the post-credits scene, the bonus content, the thing you get for sticking around. Let me talk about a handful of episodes that I think are underrated masterpieces. The ones that don't show up on every best of list, but that I personally believe represent the show at its absolute finest. The Return of the Fellowship of the Ring to the Two Towers. Season 6, Episode 13, aired November 13th, 2002. The setup is simple. The boys are playing Lord of the Rings in the backyard, which was extremely on brand for 2002 when the Peter Jackson films were at the height of their cultural dominance. Randy accidentally gives them an adults-only video to return to the video store instead of the actual Lord of the Rings DVD. The boys, who haven't seen what's on the tape, treat it as the One Ring, a dark, powerful object that corrupts whoever possesses it. Butters watches the tape and is fundamentally changed by it, going full Gollum. The 6th graders are like Saruman's forces, trying to seize the tape for themselves. And the brilliance is in the gap between what the adults know is happening and what the kids think is happening. The adults are panicking because their children have accessed adult content. The kids are just playing a game. They have no idea what's on the tape. They think they're on an epic quest. And the two levels of the story never quite meet, which creates this gorgeous comedic tension that the episode milks for every possible laugh. This episode doesn't get enough love because it's in Season 6, which is sandwiched between the iconic Season 5 and the beloved Season 7. But it's one of the tightest scripts the show has ever produced. Every scene serves double duty, advancing both the kids' Lord of the Rings adventure and the adults' desperate retrieval mission. The structure is impeccable. The losing edge. I mentioned this one already, but I want to go deeper because I truly believe it's one of the top 10 episodes ever made, and it rarely appears on those lists. The premise, the boys trying to lose their baseball games, is funny enough on its own, but what elevates it is the Randy subplot, where he's fighting other dads at every game in increasingly elaborate brawls that parody Rocky, Bloodsport, and other fighting movies. The moment where Randy faces off against the Bat Dad, a dad from the opposing team's city who paints himself up like a superfan, and they have a full-on cinematic showdown in the parking lot while the baseball game is literally happening in the background, is one of the funniest visual compositions the show has ever produced. The A-plot and the B-plot are happening simultaneously in the same physical space, but they're occupying completely different genres. The kids are in a sports comedy about trying to lose. Randy is in an action movie about fighting his way to the championship. Neither one acknowledges the other, and the disconnect is comedy gold. Margaritaville, Season 13, Episode 3, aired March 25th, 2009, is the show's response to the 2008 financial crisis, and it's one of the most ambitious episodes they've ever produced. The episode parallels the financial meltdown with biblical narratives. Stan goes on a literal quest through the financial system, encountering the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve like stops on a pilgrim's journey, while Randy leads the town in economic austerity that mirrors religious asceticism. The solution to the crisis in the episode is decided by a group of economists who cut the head off a chicken and let it run around on a board game to pick a random policy, because that's essentially how they perceived the actual response to the crisis to be working. What kills me about Margaritaville is how accurately it captured the mood of 2009. Everyone was scared. Nobody understood what had happened or why. The experts seemed to be making it up as they went along. And South Park took all of that anxiety and confusion and turned it into a story about a margarita mixer that nobody wants to take responsibility for purchasing. The margarita mixer is a perfect metaphor for toxic debt, an expensive, unnecessary luxury that gets passed around from person to person until nobody remembers who bought it or why, and somehow the entire economy collapses because of it. I genuinely think Margaritaville should be shown in economics classes, not as a substitute for actual education, obviously, but as a supplement, because it explains the emotional reality of the financial crisis more effectively than most documentaries I've seen. And it does it in 22 minutes with paper cutout characters. Awesomeo, Season 8, Episode 5, aired April 14th, 2004, is pure character comedy. Cartman dresses up as a robot called Awesomeo and pretends to be Butters' friend in order to learn his secrets. But Butters is so genuinely kind and trusting that the deception becomes increasingly difficult for Cartman to maintain. He has to listen to Butters' hopes and fears. He has to comfort him. He has to be a friend. And for Cartman, being forced to simulate genuine human connection is its own kind of torture. The episode ends up in Hollywood, where movie executives think Awesomeo is a real robot and demand that he pitch them movie ideas. Cartman, desperate to maintain the disguise, rattles off hundreds of movie concepts, most of which star Adam Sandler. The Hollywood executives eat it up. It's a savage takedown of the film industry's reliance on formulaic content, delivered through a bit that's also just incredibly funny on a pure joke per minute basis. But what makes Awesomeo great isn't the Hollywood satire, it's the Cartman-Butters dynamic. Butters is so open, so trusting, so completely without guile, that Cartman, the most manipulative character on the show, can't figure out how to exploit him. Butters has nothing to hide. His secrets are innocent and touching, and Cartman, trapped in a robot suit, has to sit there and receive genuine affection from someone he normally treats as a punching bag. The discomfort Cartman feels isn't physical, it's emotional. He's being forced to experience empathy, and it's killing him. That dynamic, Cartman versus Butters, cynicism versus innocence, cruelty versus kindness, is one of the most fertile creative territories the show has, and the golden age is when they found and developed it. Before season 5, Butters barely existed. By season 8, he was arguably the most important character in the show after the main 4. Test, season 10, episode 7, aired August 2nd, 2006, takes this even further. Cartman's mom, Leanne, finally can't control him anymore and calls in a dog trainer, a clear parody of Cesar Millan, to discipline her son using animal training techniques. And it works. Cartman becomes polite, respectful. He starts doing his homework. He's a different kid. And then his mom ruins it. Because Leanne is as much a part of the problem as Cartman is. She's lonely, she's codependent. She needs Cartman to need her. When he becomes self-sufficient, she panics and reverses all the progress. And the episode ends with Cartman back to his old self, scheming against his own mother. The horror of that ending isn't the scheme. We've seen Cartman go to dark places before. It's the recognition that the system that created this monster is self-perpetuating. Cartman isn't evil because he was born evil. He's evil because his environment enables and rewards his evil. And any attempt to fix him will fail because the people around him are too broken to support the change. That's not a fart joke. That's family systems therapy. I want to talk about one more thing in depth: the show's relationship with death, because this is something that evolves across the golden age in a way I find fascinating. In the early seasons, death is a punchline. Kenny dies every episode. It's quick, it's absurd, it's played for shock laughs, and it resets immediately. Death has no weight. It has no consequences. It's just another gag. Then, Kenny dies happens in season 5, and death suddenly has weight, real weight. Kenny's illness is portrayed honestly. His friends grieve. The show treats his death as something that matters, and the audience, who has been trained for 5 years to laugh at Kenny's deaths, doesn't know how to feel. That tonal whiplash is deliberate. The show is saying, you've been laughing at this kid dying for 5 years, and now we're going to make you feel it. Are you still laughing? Then, the return of Chef in season 10. Isaac Hayes is gone. Chef is killed off brutally, impaled, shot, mauled by animals, and set on fire. The graphic nature of the death is partly the show's anger at Scientology, partly their dark humor, and partly a commentary on how television shows dispose of characters whose actors leave. But it's also genuinely sad, because Chef was beloved. He was a fixture, and his death represents something real that was lost. Not just a fictional character, but a real relationship between the creators and their cast member. Then Stanley's Cup, season 10, episode 14, aired November 15th. 2006, where a kids' pee-wee hockey team is pitted against a professional team in the finale, and the kids get absolutely destroyed. One of the kids on the team has cancer, and there's a whole subplot about him finding hope through the hockey team. And then they lose, badly, brutally, and the cancer kid doesn't get a happy ending. He just loses, like real life. That episode made a lot of people angry. They felt it was mean-spirited, that the show was being cruel for cruelty's sake. But I think it was actually about subverting the inspirational sports movie template that Hollywood uses to package suffering into neat, uplifting narratives. Real life doesn't work that way. Sometimes the sick kid doesn't get the big win. Sometimes the underdog loses. And by refusing to give the audience the happy ending they expected, the show was making a point about our unhealthy reliance on fictional catharsis. And then, much later, You're Getting Old, where death becomes metaphorical. Stan's childhood is dying. His friendships are dying. His parents' marriage is dying. Nothing is literally killed, but the loss is more devastating than any of Kenny's deaths because it's the kind of loss we've all experienced. The death of joy. The death of the ability to enjoy things you used to love. That's a more terrifying kind of death than anything a stingray or a bus or a falling piano can do. The evolution of how South Park handles death, from punchline to tragedy to metaphor, mirrors the evolution of the show itself, and each stage is more sophisticated than the last. The Golden Age is the period where death goes from being a joke to being something the show wrestles with honestly, and that wrestling That willingness to take something that was once purely comedic and add emotional depth to it without losing the comedy is what separates the golden age from everything that came before. I've been thinking about this for weeks, and I keep arriving at the same conclusion. The golden age of South Park is defined not by a specific set of seasons, but by a quality, the quality of meaning what you say. During the golden age, every episode means something. Even the silly one, even the gross ones. There's always a point, a target, an insight, a feeling. The show is never just going through the motion. It's always engaged, always alive, always paying attention to the world and reflecting it back with distortion and clarity in equal measure. When that quality is present, and I think it's been present more often than not, across nearly 30 years, South Park is one of the greatest creative works in the history of American television. Not just animation, television, full stop. When it's absent in a few scattered episodes here and there, in a rough stretch during season 20, in some of the weaker Tegrity episodes, the show feels like what its critics always said it was, just crude humor with no substance. But those moments of absence are rare, far rarer than the discourse around the show would suggest. South Park has produced over 330 episodes, and I'd argue that at least 250 of them are good, at least 150 are great, and at least 50 are among the best episodes of any television show ever made. That's an astonishing hit rate for any series, let alone one that makes each episode in less than a week. So here's my final answer, the one I want you to take away from this video if you take nothing else. The golden age of South Park started when the show found its voice, somewhere around season 4 or 5, and it hasn't ended yet. It's evolved. It's changed its shape, it's had peaks and valleys, but the voice is still there. The heart is still there. The willingness to say the unsayable is still there. And as long as Trey Parker is lying on the floor of his studio at 4 in the morning, convinced that this week's episode is the one that finally ruins everything, and Matt Stone is telling him to get up because it's funny, and they need to finish it before airtime, as long as that's happening, the golden age continues. It's not about the episodes. It's about the process, the love, the stubbornness, the refusal to quit even when you think you should. That's what a golden age really is. And South Park, messy, beautiful, offensive, brilliant South Park, is still in it. Okay, now I'm really done. For real this time. I promise. Good night, thank you. And don't forget to subscribe. They killed Kenny, you bastards. Okay, I know I keep saying I'm done, and then not being done. And at this point, it's basically a bit. But I genuinely have more to say. So if you're still here, God bless you. And if you fell asleep an hour ago, and this is just ambient background noise, that's the whole point of this channel. So I'm thrilled either way. I want to go back to something I mentioned early on, but didn't fully explore. The movie, South Park. Bigger, longer, and uncut, because I think its importance to the golden age conversation extends far beyond just being a good film. When the movie was being developed in early 1998, the show had only been on the air for about 6 months. Think about that. The show was still in its first season, and Parker and Stone were already developing a feature film. Comedy Central gave them a deal that included a 7-figure cash bonus to bring the show to the big screen. The conditions Parker and Stone insisted on were specific. The movie had to be rated R at minimum. No compromises on content. No watering down. And what they produced was extraordinary. A full musical, not a comedy with musical numbers, but a genuine, structurally rigorous musical in the tradition of Broadway and the Disney Renaissance. Except instead of princesses singing about dreams, you have children singing about how their mothers are big fat bitches. Mark Shaman, who had scored films like A Few Good Men and The American President, was brought on as co-composer. The songs are legitimately brilliant. Blame Canada has a melody and lyrical structure that would be right at home in a Sondheim show. Kyle's Mom's a Bitch is set to a can-can arrangement that builds in complexity and orchestration as it goes. La Resistance is a genuine 11 o'clock number with counterpoint vocals and key changes. The MPAA fight over the rating is its own story. The film was initially submitted for review and received an NC-17 rating. Parker and Stone resubmitted it 6 times, with different cuts, and each time it came back NC-17. The MPAA wouldn't tell them specifically what to cut, just that it was too much, so they'd guess, make changes, resubmit, and get the same rating. Eventually, they figured out the trick. The MPAA was more concerned with specific words and sexual content than with violence. So they could show a man being impaled, set on fire, and attacked by dogs, which they did to Saddam Hussein, but they had to remove certain uses of the word fuck. The absurdity of this prioritization, extreme violence acceptable, specific words not, became a central theme of the movie itself. It's a movie about censorship that was shaped by actual censorship during its production. The snake eating its own tail. When Blame Canada was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Original Song at the 72nd ceremony in March 2000, Parker and Stone attended the event. Their attire was unconventional. Parker wore a green Versace dress, identical to the one Jennifer Lopez had famously worn to the Grammy Awards. Stone wore a pink gown, similar to one Gwyneth Paltrow had worn to the previous year's Oscars. They were, by multiple reports, under the influence of LSD at the time. Robin Williams performed Blame Canada at the ceremony. Parker later said something to the effect of, "I was like, this is the craziest thing that has ever happened. Robin Williams is singing our song at the Oscars, and I'm in a dress on acid." The song lost to Phil Collins' "You'll Be in My Heart" from Tarzan, a result Parker and Stone have complained about ever since. The movie grossed $83 million worldwide on a $21 million budget. It was the highest grossing R-rated animated film until 2016, when Sausage Party finally overtook it. And I want to emphasize, 17 years. For 17 years, this movie about paper cutout children fighting a war between the United States and Canada over profanity in a Terrence and Phillip movie held that record. No other R-rated animated film could touch it for almost 2 decades. And the movie's legacy extends beyond its box office. It set the template for what South Park could be at its most ambitious. It proved that Parker and Stone could sustain a feature-length narrative, that they could write complex musical arrangements, that they could operate at a scale far beyond the weekly 22-minute format. Every ambitious multi-episode arc the show would later attempt, Imagination Land, the Coon Trilogy, the pandemic specials, the post-COVID movies, has its roots in what the movie proved was possible. There's another thread I want to pull on, the relationship between South Park and its competition. Because the Golden Age exists in context. It's not just about South Park being great. It's about South Park being great at a time when other animated shows were also doing interesting work, and the comparisons illuminate what makes South Park unique. The Simpsons, which started in 1989, was in its post-Golden Age decline by the time South Park hit its peak. Most Simpsons fans place that show's golden age in seasons 3 through 8, roughly 1991 to 1997. So there's almost no overlap between the two shows' peak periods. By the time South Park was producing Scott Tenerman Must Die, The Simpsons was in its 12th season and widely considered to be well past its best. This meant that South Park had very little direct competition for the crown of Best Animated Show on television during its peak years. Family Guy debuted in 1999 and was canceled twice before being revived by strong DVD sales in 2005. It and South Park developed a famously adversarial relationship, culminating in the 2-part episode Cartoon Wars in Season 10. Episodes 3 and 4 aired April 5th and 12th, 2006, where South Park directly attacked Family Guy's writing style, arguing that Family Guy's cutaway jokes were the equivalent of random jokes being selected by manatees pushing balls in a tank. It was brutal, it was personal, and it was Parker and Stone drawing a line in the sand about what they thought comedy should aspire to versus what they thought it had become. That combativeness, the willingness to attack not just cultural targets, but other shows, other approaches to comedy, is part of what gives Golden Age South Park its edge. They weren't just making fun of politicians and celebrities. They were making fun of their own industry, their own peers, their own medium. Nothing was sacred, including the art form itself. And then there's the video games. Both South Park, The Stick of Truth, released in 2014, developed by Obsidian Entertainment, and South Park, The Fractured But Whole, released in 2017, developed by Ubisoft San Francisco, are essentially extended episodes of the show. Parker and Stone wrote the scripts, did the voice acting, and were heavily involved in the creative direction. The Stick of Truth, in particular, is remarkable. It looks and plays like an episode of South Park that you control, with the show's characteristic visual style reproduced so faithfully that screenshots are indistinguishable from the show itself. These games don't usually come up in the Golden Age conversation, but I think they should, because they represent another dimension of the franchise's ambition during its peak adjacent years. Parker and Stone didn't just phone it in for a licensed game. They spent years developing these projects, and the results are among the best licensed games ever made. The Stick of Truth has an 85 on Metacritic. The Fractured But Whole has a 79. These are genuinely good games that genuinely extend the South Park experience into a new medium. And there's The Book of Mormon. I know, it's not South Park, but it's impossible to talk about the golden age of South Park without acknowledging that Parker and Stone spent years developing a Broadway musical that opened in 2011, won 9 Tony Awards, and is one of the most commercially successful musicals of the 21st century. The Book of Mormon is, in many ways, the theatrical version of what South Park does at its best. It takes a topic that people are afraid to touch, in this case, the beliefs and missionary culture of the Church of Latter-day Saints, and treats it with a combination of irreverence and genuine affection that makes you laugh while also making you think. The Book of Mormon pulled Parker and Stone's attention away from South Park during a critical period. The documentary 6 Days to Air opens with them returning from the Broadway opening of the Book of Mormon to begin work on season 15. And season 15 is the season that gave us You're Getting Old, the episode where the creators seemed to be questioning whether they still had it in them to make South Park. It's hard not to draw a line between the creative high of the Book of Mormon and the existential doubt of You're Getting Old. Having just created something new and acclaimed, going back to the same show they'd been making for 14 years must have felt complicated, but they went back. They always go back. And the show kept going. And even in its most uncertain moments, it kept producing episodes that mattered, that made people talk, that made people laugh and think and argue. That's the golden age. Not a period, not a set of seasons, a quality, an attitude, a commitment to the work that transcends any individual episode's success or failure. And you know what's funny? This is exactly the kind of video that You're Getting Old is about. I'm sitting here at an ungodly hour, analyzing every aspect of a show about crude paper cutout children, trying to determine whether it's still as good as it used to be. Stan would look at this video and see a giant pile of shit, but Butters would look at it and see someone who really cares about something. And that's the beauty of South Park. It holds both perspectives simultaneously, and neither one is wrong. I choose to be Butters. I choose to care. I choose to believe the golden age is still going, and I choose to stay up way too late making videos about it. Thank you for being Butters with me tonight. Now go to sleep. For real. I mean it this time. Subscribe, like, comment. Tell me your golden age, and I'll see you next time on Paper Town. Good night.